All right, Kevin, we appreciate it. And now we're excited to hear from Paul. Help me out here.
Tomaszewski.
Tomaszewski with MB Roland Distillery. And I'm going to be learning all about Paul and MB Roland right along with you. So come on up.
Okay. Well, let me start. I did bring a few aids. I did not bring a PowerPoint because I'm accustomed to sort of giving our background and story. But since I do only have 6 minutes, I'm just going to stick a few of these out for y'all to check out. And it's just very basic information that I'll get into. But I'm the co-founder, owner, head distiller at MB Roland Distillery. A lot of similarities between some of his journey and ours. And it started with myself and my wife. She kept her full-time job. I was in the Army nearby Fort Campbell. And the story is an Amish dairy farm came up for sale, which is sort of an anomaly. And honestly, I looked at it to an extent as a sign from God because the location was perfect, the setup was perfect, and Amish don't sell. So it was one of those things where we have to jump on this. So we did. While I was getting out of the Army, I spent a lot of time planning the business, traveling around, looking around. At that time, I thought that the craft distilling movement was booming. And if you're not familiar with what's going on in the industry, the very quick explanation is what you saw happen or start happening about 30 years ago with microbreweries. That's happening in the craft distilling world as well. When we opened in 2009, there was maybe 50 to 100 craft distilleries in the entire country. Craft or micro as opposed to big distillery. Now there's probably 300 to 400. So it's continuing to grow that way. We were the first one in Kentucky to open as a small-scale distillery from grain to glass, meaning we make all of our products, as opposed to buying it from someone else and telling you it's ours. But it was a very unique process because when we got this plot of land, we said, well, we really can't afford this sitting on it. We have to pay for it. So the plan was to start the business in 5 years. Instead, that was, hey, let's start this now. So the result was we started underfunded, under-equipped, undermanned, under everything, and not in the best situation. And a lot of, I guess you could say, ambition and unknowns sort of helped us persevere through a lot of that initial startup. When we opened up, we had a 100-gallon still, and a 100-gallon still is very, very small, and I mean, you can't make a lot of product with that. So the focus was to make product that we could sell on site, like a small winery or a microbrewery, and then do a little bit of distribution as we were able to. And distribution in our world is difficult because you're basically competing against 8 major international conglomerates that own the entire liquor store. And so you're this little nothing that you get on the shelf and you don't have the marketing dollars or the ability, but and we appreciate and understand that. So the distribution that we do sell at this point is very limited in the states that we distribute. So on paper, it looks nice that we sell in 10 states, but it's a very limited amount that we sell in most of those states. It's not like we're at every single store. Case in point, we're not in stores in Madisonville because our distributor in Kentucky doesn't get out this way. As far as the actual business, we really, again, not doing it in the best way. We didn't do it in the best way as far as the money goes, but we threw everything in and to an extent still continue to. When we started our business, we put our house up for mortgage against a loan with the bank. And you were talking about a bank that actually helped you out. The one that we do our business with, it's the same way, Heritage Bank, and they're based in Hopkinsville. They've been with us every step of the way and supported us completely. And you talk about a funny conversation with your banker when we go up, my wife and I, and we present the plan to the banker, and the banker basically told us after the fact, after they gave us the loan, you know, it's sort of funny, honestly, I never planned to see you again. Because he took all of our numbers and handed it back to the loan processors and expected them to come back and say, this is crazy. A distillery, what are you talking about? And they crunched all the numbers and it looked good and they liked our plan and our background, so that was great. Well, end of last year, we got to a very extreme breaking point with our equipment, our production abilities, and our equipment was basically about to die. And again, we started very simple. And so we went back to the bank and said, hey, we need to figure something out here because we may not be in business in 6 months if we don't find some sort of replacement for this. And as far as the actual bank said, they said, okay, well, we'll do something for you if you sell your house. And so the house that we owned, we weren't living in it, we were renting it because we were living at the business because business sort of required that for us to tend to it the right way. We went ahead and sold our house, and that helped finance the loan for the new equipment. And now we're in a position where we can actually build our business in a much more comfortable manner. At this point, or when we started, it was just myself and my wife, and I was the only full-time employee. She kept her day job. Now we've evolved to 7 full-time employees and 8 part-time employees. And our business has a whole bunch of different arms to it. The main one being, of course, the production side that obviously makes the product that we sell on site, we sell to distributors. Oh, there we go. And then the other parts of the business are the retail on-site sales, and then we do live music events that we've made a very distinctive effort to make family friendly for the community and do it in a very respectable manner, even though that we are an alcohol manufacturing facility. And then at the same time, we do, believe it or not, of course, to educate those that want to get into our business. And the real reason why we do that is because so many people were coming to us because we were one of the first ones in this general area to get into the craft distilling business. There's a little bit more on top of that, but I'll let y'all go with questions since we're at the 6-minute mark.
Questions?
So what from the Army got you to here? I'm really not trying to...
No, I know.
No judgment in that. I mean, honestly, it's an honest question.
I just had an interest in the business, as well as, you know, I've always jokingly said I've been very smart with my, you know, alcohol habits. I've never been a big drinker, but I do like a good drink. And so I just got interested in the distilling side, particularly the whiskey distilling business. And my background in the Army, I was an officer, so I got a lot of experience with government paperwork. And when we did our application, real quick little explanation, the distilling world is the NFL of alcohol production. Regulatory, taxes, everything across the board. I mean, the wine and the beer regs are a joke compared to ours are super thick. Well, when I put together our packet, which at that time was all done on paper, now it's done online for the feds, it was about this big and we mailed it in a box. And when the guy got it, he said, "This is the best application I've ever seen." He's like, "Have you done this before?" And I said, "Well, no, not really." I said, "But I know what to do when I send something to a government person." Yeah. So I mean, I know how to fill something out like that. I know exactly to give them everything that they could possibly want. And it's one of those things that you know, the distilling side is not that difficult, but if you can understand the regulations and the requirements associated with business, a lot of times that's what gets people in trouble, or makes it difficult for them to open their doors. And case in point, in our business, because it's illegal to distill alcohol without a federal permit, no matter where you are in the country, because a lot of people say, well, in this state it's legal. No, it's not. You can brew beer at home, you can make wine at home, you can't distill alcohol at home without a federal permit like the one we have. So essentially you set up your operation and you send in your packet, because it has to be set up when you send in your packet, and you stare at it and it collects dust, and you're not even allowed to play with it until, you know, your licensing is all straight. And so a lot of people will send in their information and be delayed 6 months, a year or more, just screwing up their paperwork and, you know, going back and forth with the feds on trying to get everything straightened out. And ours was like, done, you know, whenever they got it.
What I find really, really, really fascinating is the fact that you can't play with the product first, but yet you had this passion and desire to make a product that you hadn't tasted, that you made on your own. So how did you finesse that aspect of it and get to a position where you had a really good product that you could send to people? How long did that process take, and how did you do that?
I mean, we were pretty confident that we were comfortable that we could make something. A lot of our products evolved, meaning they weren't a plan day one. But hindsight being 20/20, I sort of look at it like, yeah, that was a little reckless. But the mindset was, hey, we feel like we can do this. You know, we understand the process, we understand, you know, the product side. And a whole lot of our business is marketing. Because essentially it goes on a shelf and that's how it gets sold if you're selling it to a store or distributor. So if it's not something that gets someone's eye, it doesn't matter what's inside that bottle. Yes, sir.
At this point, are you using an outside marketing firm, or are you doing it entirely in-house?
We do have a local marketing firm that we do a lot of business with that does a lot of our design work and a little bit of our wargaming. But I mean, as far as how you market it, that's really done internally. Yes, ma'am.
Since you said this is on the shelves here in Madisonville, but you are allowed to sell from your location.
Mhm.
So if we wanted to try some of this, that would be the best place to go get it right now?
Yes, unfortunately, correct.
Can you order it online?
You can ship wine, you can't ship spirits.
How much do you have in your trunk right now?
Well, it was a 7:30 meeting, and I was like, I don't know if that's right to bring product. I personally don't drink wine.
We're a pretty flexible group, Paul.
Yes, sir.
So, sorry if this is a little bit of a controversial question, but it's interesting that you put a distillery in an Amish.
Derek?
Did you meet any resistance from your neighbors? How have you managed that?
We did a very crude study when we were looking at where to set up. At the time, Trigg County was dry, Todd County was still completely dry, and on the Tennessee side, you could not open a distillery except in Lincoln, Coffee, or Moore counties. They have since changed that law, but that was the law at the time. So I literally called every county nearby that we were interested in, Logan County, well, I'm not going to call out any more names, never mind. So I called a bunch of counties, and I said, talk to their elected officials, economic people, etc. And resoundingly, the greatest response we had was from Christian County, and it was already completely a wet county, so you could do tastings and sales on site. And we said, this is just staring at us in the face. And so that's when we started looking for the land. The farm came up for sale. The Amish weren't too concerned about that because they were seceding from their congregation and moving to Indiana, and that was the whole reason they were selling. So they were looking to flip the property in the most, reasonable way. And one thing that we pushed, and it's true, we're not actually, full of it when we say this. One thing we really pushed up front was this is about agritourism and local tourism. And since we opened, we're at this point we're the most visited craft distillery in Kentucky, and that includes some of these guys that are on the pathways of where the Big Bourbon Trail is. And we're out here in Western Kentucky, and we've got more visitors than any other small-scale distillery in Kentucky, and we like sort of spiking that football because we're in Western Kentucky, And anyway, as far as the site goes, we use local corn for every bit of product we make. So it's all there from Christian County. It's a very agrarian environment where we've got crops growing out in the field, and you sort of have that experience when you come on the property. And tours are a big part of what we do. We do not charge for tours or for those 21 or over tastings. So it's one of those things where we welcome all of that, and we do it in a very respectable manner. We try to. Yes, sir.
quick comment and then a question. I posted a couple of minutes ago 1 Million Cups presentation by Paul Tomaszewski
Yes, sir.
of MB Roland Distillery in Pembroke, Kentucky, on here with a photograph, and already somebody's posted one of our favorite places to visit and such a cool story. So the word's getting out there. My question is, where do you go from here? What do you see for the future, and what challenges do you anticipate?
Well, after the upgrade we just did, which if you come to our distillery, I was explaining to a couple of y'all earlier, our old still's a fountain now. And then you go inside and you see the new stuff. I'm sick of, the plan is, okay, we're gonna start paying off debt and getting into, and making a living. And if we ever do another upgrade, it's gonna be way down the road. But, you know, we're big enough now where we can, when I say big enough, our production abilities now are such that we can actually build our business a little bit in a comfortable manner. One of the biggest things for us is, of course, on the front of that rack card, if you look at it, you see a bottle of Kentucky bourbon whiskey that you cannot buy if you come to the distillery, because when we put it on the shelf, it sells out usually the day of, maybe within 2 or 3 days, sometimes within minutes. And the reason why is because, you know, when we started up underfunded, we put away a little bit of bourbon. Okay, you're doing a little bit better, you put away a tiny bit more bourbon, and you can only make so much with a 100-gallon still while you're trying to make your other products that you're selling on site day to day. And so at this point, we're able to put away a little bit more in a comfortable manner, something we can really build off of. So in about really a year, 2 years from now, we'll have a nice stock of that coming out. We'll be distributing some of it. It's a very unique product. I'm not going to get too much into it, but it's very popular with the people that know about it. And our long-term goal is all about that product right there and other things that we put into barrels. We can sell any of our products on site because you can taste them and you can understand what they are. But that one will sell itself when it sits on a shelf. All of our other products, not the case so much.
Is it because it's moonshine, basically, and people have a perception of moonshine, or because whiskey is such a cool thing and people like it, even people that aren't used to it? I mean, I just discovered whiskey about 4 years ago. I'm kind of like,
You sort
okay.
of hit on it. The easiest way to explain it is we were part of the originating of this moonshine market. So you're talking a new emerging market that doesn't have a very established connoisseur clientele, whatever. You've got people like crazy. They're literally the people, at least once a week, will walk into our tasting room. I want some bourbon. And you tell them, no, we don't have any because. And they're like, I don't care about all your other products. That's all I want. And they'll walk out. And you have a very well-established clientele with whiskey and bourbon. And then on top of that, there's actually a major boom going on with bourbon and whiskey in general. And granted, our production is tiny, 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 but we like it that way. We're going to be a Pappy Van Winkle. We're not going to be a Jim Beam. So you'll be like walking around the shelf, you see MB Roland on the shelf. If you want it, buy it, because it might not be there the next day. But that's sort of our game plan, long-term goal. We're never going to be huge. Yes, sir.
When you started, and prior to licensing and all this, did you already have your equipment, the one you've got drinking fountain now, the original? You already had this basic equipment. Where did you get it? I mean, did you start with used equipment or new?
We started with
small?
very crude equipment.
Was it something that I guess running a sheet metal shop at one point,
Right,
we made stills,
right.
but you never really told necessarily who you made them for.
Has the statute of limitations run on that yet?
Just
Very law enforcement officers.
Just for reference,
Since we're out of the sheet metal business.
it is federal law that if you manufacture a still, there's nothing against that. And in most cases, you can't, there's nothing wrong with having a still, possessing a still. But if you sell it to someone, you're supposed to keep records of that.
That was the problem.
And there's actually a manufacturer in Kentucky where they were visited by an actual federal investigator who said, I want to see who you've sold your stills to. And they sent out messages to all the people and said, just so you know, they got your name. It still goes, we got it from a manufacturer that makes them for both fuel ethanol and beverage production. And the basic design and concept is very simple, but we had to do certain things in our production to accommodate the fact, this wasn't a steam powered operation when we started up. So we had to do certain things where our efficiency was not the greatest. To put it this way, a lot of our upgrade paid for itself just in materials that we weren't wasting through our process because it was so inefficient with our original production process.
I got a couple of questions. I want to make sure I'm clear on the product you're making. Is this one line product, it's oak barrel bourbon, or is this more the moonshine type grain?
Yes. We make about 13, 14 different products.
Okay, now the second part of my question is, I know with Purple Toad Winery and Ruby Moon Winery, they self-distribute. Is that legal for you to do?
NFL alcohol.
Okay.
In Kentucky, you can get a small farm winery license for $150, and you can truck it to where you want. You can sell it at a farmer's market or a state fair, and it's almost like selling Kool-Aid compared to us. We have to sell it to a licensed distributor. That distributor has to receive it in their warehouse. Then they have to go and send it out to stores.
And you have to ship to their warehouse?
Correct.
Okay, you said you had part of Kentucky, not Western Kentucky. Who is the distributor that is not in this part of
The state. It's River City. They're based out of Louisville, obviously. Kentucky's not the greatest state for small-scale producers like us for distribution. And so your options are go with some larger guys that are going to forget about your product while it sits in the warehouse, or go with a smaller scale guy like we do, but they don't cover the whole state. So, it's a trade-off. And we've slowly grown with them as they've grown, and they might eventually hit out here.
There are small distributors though that do cover this in the state.
Not ones I want to do business with. Yes, sir.
The federal tax, you pay that when it's done, or when you store it, or when it's shipped, or?
Technically, when it leaves our property. A quick little two side notes. One of the biggest issues with our business is the taxes are very, very, very high. When I say very high, I pay them a lot of money, and it's hard without getting into numbers that I don't know if they paint the picture. The easiest way to explain it is if you were to take alcohol, 3 different bottles, and boil it down to 1% alcohol, your beer taxes are roughly 1/3 of your spirits taxes if you boil it all down to 1% alcohol. Consequently, if you're a small-scale winery or a small-scale brewery, you pay 20% of that same amount. So essentially what happens, and we pay 100%, we pay the same as Jim Dean, because there's no law passed for that. There's stuff trying to be worked in DC, but have fun trying to, really make that happen. It's going to be years till that happens. So essentially, we have this huge barrier to entry in our business where you're going to pay the full amount of taxes, and it's 3 times the amount on top of that compared to wine and beer, respectively. But we pay it whenever it leaves the property. There was a barrel aging tax in Kentucky, which we just passed a law recently. I say we, the Kentucky Distillers Association did it, and they said a big part of why that passed was because of craft distilleries getting involved in the conversation, where whiskey would sit there and it would have a tax on it. Every single year you pay that tax while it sits there aging. And so they just did something to somewhat repeal that, and it was a big, big deal for Kentucky distillers, because you're talking, you don't get anything from that tax. You couldn't even write it off. Yes?
Had you visited or seen other craft distillers before? Was that what sparked your interest, or made you think that you could do this?
I was researching just whiskey products in general, and I stumbled upon a story about this little distillery in Colorado, and I said, this is almost like a microbrewery I've never heard of a small whiskey production like this. And then I found a few more and said, this is interesting. And then as I researched more, found out that this is a developing industry. And then when we decided, yes, we want to do this business, I actually set up a trip and I went from here to New York and back, and I toured 9 different craft distilleries on top of several others I've been to, which sounds like a lot, but you can now tour a dozen craft distilleries in Kentucky alone. Whereas, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when we were getting into this, I had to drive to New York and back. Yes, ma'am.
Talk about profitability on product. I know you just talked about how much the taxes were on the bottles and how long the process is before you get return on your investment. Whenever you do that, how profitable is it to do a distillery?
I don't earn a paycheck yet.
Okay?
It'll be about a year or 2 before I do.
But on a normal average bottle or a barrel, you would say.
There's no real exact math for that because it depends on what you sell the product for. The alcohol content itself is taxed based on the percentage of the alcohol. So, if it's 80 proof bourbon versus 110 proof bourbon, that's different taxes. The way we make our product is very, very unique, and it's not a cheap product as far as the bourbon goes.
What does it sell for?
It sells for $55 for a fifth, but it's also barrel proof. And we choose to do it that way because we don't want to compete with 80 or 90 proof bourbons out there because there's no way we can compete with the price point, marketing, and all that. We want to be a unique product to where if someone wants to purchase something unique for their collection, or a restaurant wants to have something very nice, they're going to come after us. So.
Where are you from?
I'm from southern Louisiana.
Welcome to Kentucky.
I've been here, I'm very much a Kentuckian at this point. And I'll tell you right now, I always tell people this and get a laugh out of it, but it's 100% true. Kentucky and Louisiana have a lot in common. It's a natural fit. It's a very unique situation. Bad roads, corrupt politics, and alcohol is a major part of the economy.
Thank you. This was great today. Next week, we have Marion Miller and PJ Woodside with
Big Biting Pig Productions.
Okay, I knew I would say
Film
that.
producer.
All mixed up, so. Tomorrow morning, sunrise session, 7:30 to 8:30 at Country Covered.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. Big Biting Pig Productions is the 30th. Tony Smith, who just left, who started Father and Sons Liquors, is next week.
Okay.
Which is why he was asking you those.
I wish my distributor came out here, but yeah, it is what it is.
Okay, so tomorrow morning, 7:30, Country Covered, be a great way to network. Okay, thank y'all very much.
Thank you.